Our next step is to associate an activation token with users. So let's take a look at what that code will look like. We might have a user, and then there will be an activation token attached to that user, and that will be paired with an activation digest in the database. So this will be a virtual attribute, but we do want to make some additions to the data model. Let's take a look at that. The last thing we added was the admin attribute in the last lesson. Now we're going to add the activation digest to go with the activation token, an activated Boolean that will give us an activated question mark method, and then even though we won't actually be using it in this lesson or indeed in the tutorial, for future reference we're going to record when the user was activated. And like the created at and updated at columns, that will be a date time. Let's turn that into a migration. We're going to add activation to users. And there are three things. There's the activation digest right here, which is a string. There's activated, which is a Boolean, so that'll let us do things like this. If user.activated question mark. And then the activated at date time. There's actually one thing I want to do here. You might be able to guess it if you think about it. So let's go to db migrate, see if this is it. Yeah, it's already been updated. Great. So this is the migration. There are three attributes being added to the users table. And as with this admin migration, we want to make a default. So in fact, it's the same default. Activated should be false by default. Users should start in an inactive state, and then we'll activate them when they click on the activation link in the email we'll send. Let's save that and run the migration. Let's think about what's going to be involved in activating users now. When a user signs up for the site, they start in an inactive state, but they'll be activated when they click on a link with the right activation token, in particular the token corresponding to an activation digest. So that means that new users need to have a digest associated with them. So let's take a look at the user model. Here we've got a before save callback. Remember that we downcased the email to standardize on lowercase email. In this case, instead of having a standard method fire before a user is saved, we want it to happen before they're created, just the first time. Updating the user through the account settings shouldn't require reactivation, but that would be the case if we used a before save callback. So as you might be able to guess, just linguistically, there is a callback that fires before an active record object is created. That's before create. Now we could give this before create callback a block, like here, but that's actually not the standard way to do it. This was just the easiest thing to do at the time. But we're more advanced now, so let me show you the way that it's usually done. The usual convention is to give what's called a method reference. This is similar to the filters, the before filters. So we're going to do before create activation digest, and then we'll put this in this private section here because we don't need this outside of the object. Remember, when doing assignment, we need self dot. The self dot activation token. We want to set the token, and we can just reuse this new token that we made for the remember me functionality. By the way, if this bothers you, you think, well, where's this activation token? We'll take care of that in a second. There's a digest. And that's going to be the same thing we did before with user.digest. It's just the paralleling the code here. User.digest of remember token. You'll note that before with the remember token, we used update attribute like this, right here. That won't work here though because this is a new user that hasn't even been created yet. So there's nothing to update. So this line here is being created in memory and then it will be saved automatically when the create goes through. So I mentioned before that there was this problem with the activation token. In fact, we can run our tests. Let's do this. Let's save this file. We can see we've got an error. Undefined method activation token, or activation token equals. This is the assignment right here that's failing. And the reason for that is because activation token is a virtual attribute, so we need a natural accessor, just like remember token. So we can just add that here. You can see we haven't even written any specific tests for account activation, but our test suite is still useful. There's something else I want to do while we're at it. Let's cut this here and paste it in later on. Use this method reference technique. So go down here. Now that we've added the data model, let's update the seed users and the fixtures users. So that's in seeds. Let's make these activated by default. We do activated at time.zone.now. This is a way to get the current time, taking into account the time zone. And then let's copy this here. And the fixtures are in users.yaml. Let's just make this activated true. And give it activated at. Time.zone.now. And then we can reset the database and rerun our seeds. All right, let's take a look at the console to get a sense of what happened there. And quit out of it because we just rechanged all the database users. You can see if the user was activated, the first user, and activated at. There we go. So what we're going to do is create new users in the sign up page, and they're going to be inactive by default. So like this. Right, this is right in here. So user.activated question mark is false. And then when they click on the activation link in their email, we'll change this to true. Like that.